Okay, we're good.
Good morning. Okay. Oh gosh, you realize I'm going to back into this a couple of times, but again, thank you for coming again. This was, as Jesse said, this is it gets better and better every time. I'm sure most of you have heard all sorts of jokes and stories about, Jesus changing water into wine and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to kind of bore you with one of them. So bear with me. You've probably all heard it, but did you hear about the priest driving down to New York City, and he stopped in Connecticut for speeding, and the state trooper smells alcohol on his breath, and he sees an empty wine bottle on the floor, and he says, "Sir, have you been drinking?" And the priest says, "Only water." Sheriff says, "Well, why do I smell wine?" The priest looks down at the bottle and says, "Good Lord, he's done it again." So apparently you haven't heard it before. And so that, this sets the tone for the story of one of Jesus's most popular miracles, that of turning water into wine. And of all the miracles that Jesus has performed, the loaves and the fishes, the Bartimaeus, the blind man, the paralytic, and all, and I can go on and on with all the miracles, the one of turning water into wine, for me, is the most significant. And the reason for that is because it fired the so-called starter's pistol for Jesus' public ministry. He knew that once he came out with a public miracle, there was no turning back. And his road to Calvary was set in motion, and there was nothing that was going to stop it. I like the way Thaddeus spoke. You saw in this clip here about his career of being a stone cutter. And the explanation he gave was kind of a voiceover while Jesus was changing the water into wine. As he explained, once you make a cut into the stone, it can't be undone. It commits the mason. He could have this big, costly piece of marble or whatever. Once he makes that first cut, he can't change his mind. It commits the mason to what he originally was going to do. So with the changing of the water into wine, Jesus made that first cut into the stone, and as they say, of course, the rest is history. Now, Jesus did not just make ordinary wine. That's the other thing. I kind of wish we would have taken it a little bit further. It's not your fault, because in the clip, it goes on to show that the wine that he made was much better than the wine that they already had. In fact, it was much better than any wine that they ever tasted before in their lives. So you can see he didn't just doctor the wine, or doctor the water to change it into wine. No, he transformed it into the finest wine that people had ever experienced. This is important. This is important. To the Jewish people, wine symbolized joy. Many songs that we hear, not only to Jewish people, but to all of us, wine is fun. Dean Martin, Pour the Wine. The wine, brings out the joy and love in people. The Jewish rabbis had a saying that without wine, there is no joy. And at the wedding at Cana, not only did the wine run out, but potentially the joy of the whole wedding had run out. So what does this miracle actually mean for us? Well, I think we'd all admit that there are times in everybody's life when the wine runs out. I don't care how old you are, care how long you live, the wine is going to run out. When I preside at a wedding, I often use this gospel as part of the liturgy because it reminds the couple that with all the joy that's present in that moment, there's going to be times when they run out of wine. Not to be a downer or anything like that, but let's face it, common sense tells us they're going to, we all run out of wine at times. And it's at those times that they must turn to Jesus, just like Mary did, and ask him for help. And ask him for, simply, that statement by Mary, they have run out of wine, is as significant to the story of this miracle as the actual changing of water into wine. It's symbolic of our lives. It's a scary thing when the wine runs out, because that's when we must turn to Jesus and simply say, my wine has run out. When you get to my age, we sometimes wonder if the expression of running out of wine is a metaphor for us all as we age, and we develop a sense that the best times in our lives are behind us. But it's not only when the wine runs out. The wine runs out when we ourselves are facing what appears to be insurmountable obstacles. We put our trust in youth. We put our trust in good health. But that wine, too, runs out. Families that were once filled with joy sometimes feel the pain of divorce. We squeeze all that we can get out of life. But no matter what we do, no matter how much we try, it sometimes doesn't work, and the wine runs out. The message in this miracle is that we needn't spend time looking back at what seems to be draining away from us, that life is draining away from us. But rather, if we ask Jesus for help, and we can do that easily in prayer day by day, then he can prepare us and fill us with new insights into who we are, fill us with new commitments to better ways of developing a relationship with him and developing good relationships with others. I think we all know, again, you get to my age, as we grow older, our bodies may weaken, but our spirits, as long as we are filled with the wine of our Lord Jesus Christ, our spirits will be full of God's grace. If you think about it, this story is not only about Jesus changing wine into water into wine, but it's also about changing people. We practice, old age rituals, but the wine runs out. In Mark chapter 2, verse 22, we hear, "And no one who pours new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise the wine will burst the skins, and both the wine and the wineskins will be ruined. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins." As we saw, Jesus didn't make that ordinary wine. He produced new wine that was better than what they had started with. However, he didn't just doctor it, he transformed it. And the people that drank it were also transformed. They were transformed into believing that something wonderful has happened. And what was his mission? What was Christ's mission on earth? His mission, I felt, the most important aspect was to change the mindset of the Jewish people and get them to understand that being stuck in all those rigid laws was not the way to salvation, but rather a hindrance to salvation. And the scribes and the Pharisees couldn't handle it, and they metaphorically burst to the point of putting Jesus on the cross. We can't put new ideas into old mindsets. With the advent of Vatican II, the church has undergone many changes in the last 60 or so years. And most recently, with the election of Pope Francis, more changes have taken place, and the church has become, or is becoming, much more ecumenical. Many bishops find it difficult to accept some of these changes, and they're fighting back. Again, you have to change our mindsets. We have to change our mindsets. Again, you can't put new wine in old wineskins. The message in this miracle is that we needn't spend time looking back at everything or what is it that might be draining us at the time, but rather we need to ask Jesus' help that we can be filled with the new insights into finding out about ourselves, finding out more about ourselves, finding out better ways to fill the wineskins when we're dealing with these terrible odds that we all will sometime face. So the question becomes, how much wine is left in our jars? Is there some left? Or do we need to turn to Christ now and ask for help? For me, the answer is found in 4 simple words that we heard in this episode. These words are, anybody, any idea what they might be? We heard it right at the beginning when they were looking for Jesus. We heard it at the end when Mary asked Jesus, if not now, when? You know, like I said, we heard that phrase twice. Mary's frantically looking for Jesus. Hey, he's in the temple, teaching, talking to the scribes and the Pharisees. And Mary says to him, it's too early for this. And Jesus says, if not now, when? And the next time we hear this statement is when Mary tells Jesus that they've run out of wine. And Jesus said, well, what are you telling me for? My time hasn't come. And of course, she turns the tables on him and says, if not now, when? Those words should be posted on the Procrastinators Anonymous building, because if not now, when? How many times do we put things off? Especially when it comes to developing a relationship with Christ. Whenever I feel that wine is running out of my life and I need to turn to Jesus, I pose myself that question, if not now, when? And that's so important. That's so important, as I said, to develop that relationship with Jesus. That's what it's all about. If you hear, I think this is the 5th, I think 3 out of the 5, I've talked about developing relationships with Jesus. Many of my homilies, I talk about building a relationship with Jesus. That, to me, is the key to a good life, a happy life, and the key to salvation. So, there are a couple of questions. Did you hand out the questions yet? So you already have those questions. We talked about the new wine into old wineskins, about the new wine bursting the old skins. So with this in mind, this chosen episode in particular, but all the chosen episodes, have any of them changed your perspective of life? And how has it changed how you look at life? And then the second question would be, like I said, we all run out of wine, and if we look at that wine, grace from God or Jesus' presence or relationship with Jesus, if we look at that wine, how do we react when we run into obstacles? How do we react when the wine runs out in our lives? So let's break into your section.